So good morning and good afternoon. I'm Nizar Ladek, and I have the privilege of being the Chief Executive Officer for the new digital research infrastructure organization, also affectionately known as Endrio. And I could not be more excited to welcome you all to Endrio's virtual town hall series. We're pleased to share and discuss our preliminary Canadian DRI needs assessment findings with you today. Thank you for the overwhelming interest and participation in these sessions. The attendance is much larger than we originally anticipated, which shows how invested you are all in working together. We have increased the number of breakout rooms for your group discussion, and we appreciate your patience as we adapt our environment to this extended capacity. Our team is eager to listen and gather more input from you on how we can further shape a pan-Canadian DRI ecosystem that better serves Canada's research community. We will begin today with a land acknowledgement, followed by a brief overview of our event agenda. As we meet virtually this afternoon across the country, I would like to acknowledge that we are all located on different unceded traditional territories of different nations. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought each of us to reside on these lands, and to seek understanding and our place within that history. I myself am based in Toronto, and I acknowledge that I am on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Other colleagues in Ottawa are located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, whereas those of you in Montreal are situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. As we move on to the proceedings of our meeting, I would like to extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. To start, we want to reiterate why these town halls are such an important part of the validation phase of our needs assessment process. The preliminary findings, which my colleague Felipe will discuss shortly, is the culmination of 6 months of consultation efforts conducted by our team, working groups, and researchers from across Canada. We want to thank everyone who has participated in this process so far, whether through a white paper submission or responding to our survey. Today, we are not only looking forward to validating some of our findings to date, but also working with you to define other findings that require additional feedback. Once we review the preliminary findings, which will be a short summary relating to the information we released last week, we will then go to breakout rooms for deeper discussion. There, our moderators will facilitate the discussion through questions relating to today's theme. We also have note takers to capture the discussion points and questions raised through a Google Doc that will be shared with each room. You will have the chance to comment verbally in the breakout room, via the chat function within the room, which will be captured for review, and by adding your own comments to the Google Doc. Following the breakout room discussions, we will all get back together and report a key discussion point or question that came through before we wrap up for the end of the day. Following the events, recordings of each town hall will be available on our website, along with related summary findings for review. However, we will not be recording the breakout rooms themselves. We look forward to an engaging discussion ahead. With that, I will hand it over to Felipe to review the preliminary findings related to today's theme.
Thank you, Nizar. So welcome, everybody. It's really nice to see at least 209 people already. Before I start, I really just want to say that it's a privilege for me to be in front of everybody and share the work that many of us have been conducting since October. And the work has been really spearheaded by the senior analysts, the working groups, and members of the Researcher Council. It's been really a group effort. Now, just to give me a little bit of an idea of how into depth I should go into these slides, I would like to ask you if you've had a chance to review the slides and documentation that we shared in advance. Thank you. I think that should be sufficient. Haley or Rob, do we have the numbers? Oh, perfect. So lots of detail here. So just as a little bit of a backgrounder, we started this process in October of last year, and really we wanted to do is a needs assessment that is informed by our research community and by the feedback that we receive from you. So all of this is going into the strategic plan that we will be developing at the end of the summer. But what we've done is we divided the needs assessment into two processes. The first one was really the consultation phase, where everybody would provide their feedback. And we had three mechanisms. The first one was the white papers that we launched in October, and it was really a way for people to just share their ideas on a blank slate of paper. Anything that you had in your mind about the needs and how Andrew can achieve a successful DRI in Canada, that was the way to go through. But at the same time, we had requests for current documentation, which included strategic plans, roadmaps, and this was to make sure that Andrew, as an organization that is just starting here at the national level, is already aligned with what you are doing with your own organizations. And finally, we conducted a really extensive survey, over 74 questions. We launched it in February. We had to extend it because there was a lot of interest from the community. And in the survey, we really went into depth into the EDI component of our community, the RDM, research data management, research software, and advanced research computing needs. And now we're in what we call the validation phase. We want to make sure that we understood exactly what you meant, and we want to take further feedback into some of the points that we think we didn't get enough information. So just to give you an idea of who we heard from over 350 papers through, 350 authors through 105 white papers. So we had people from over 112 organizations. And really, we discuss anything from data storage and data access to training and retentions of HQP to data governance and many more issues, many of which we're going to be discussing over the next 4 days. We also received 19 documents about what organizations were already planning, and we will make sure to align those as we move forward. In terms of the Pan-Canadian Research Service survey that we closed in March, almost 1,400 researchers responded. It's really incredible considering that 74 questions. So not an easy task, and we know that it took quite a bit of time, of your time, and so we really appreciate it. So just to give you a little bit more of a visual representation, on the left side, you have a graph in terms of geographic representation, and on the right, you have a graph in terms of discipline representation. So what you can see is that there's a diverse representation across the country. Obviously, Ontario and Quebec, the provinces with the most numbers of institutions, were really well represented in the survey, but we still had people from across the country. We see a similar pattern when we look at the research discipline, and we're happy to see that medicine and social sciences were quite present in and really responded to the survey. But we also had people from across the disciplines. So very, very excited to present some of these issues today. When we ask our researchers in our survey, what should Andrea prioritize to meet their needs? The answer was actually fairly complex because we need to prioritize a little bit of everything. And so even though right now it's hard to distinguish what each of these components is, when we break it down into the disciplines, it's a little bit more easy. So what I'm showing you here are those specific needs, but now based by discipline. And in the center, you have the numbers of respondents. So you have issues such as training of HQP and high-speed internal network computing common across many of these disciplines, but some are very specific, such as quantum computing for chemistry and secure storage for medicine. Now, going into today's specific findings, awareness and accessibility, this is mainly based from the white papers. And some of the things that we heard is that despite Canada having a huge amount and a huge diversity of DRI, it's still poorly described, and researchers are still having a hard time finding it and accessing it. Now, certainly we find that this has created increasing confusion and lack of clarity among researchers across disciplines and across the country. It has been suggested that maybe Andrew is in a position to provide a Canada-wide catalog of DRI resources, a one-stop shop where people can just go find the right solution for their specific needs and start accessing it. At the same time, we find that this lack of awareness is not just in specific areas. It's exacerbated in some disciplines that have historically not been using the DRI. And so we really need to work with local institutions and with local services to bring them up to the same level as others that have been using it historically. And we certainly acknowledge that the institutional capacity plays a major role, and Andrew would require to work closely with them to make sure that they have the adequate funding and support. Finally, what we've seen is that the application for funding is cumbersome, and we really need to work together with our stakeholders to make sure that we have a unified approach. And many have suggested the use of persistent identifiers, such as ORCID or DOIs, to make sure that the CV and other application objects are really interchangeable and across platforms. Something that we heard loud and clear was the bilingual support is a must in a country like Canada that is bilingual. And it's something that we're really looking forward to work with our local and regional partners like Calcul Quebec. At the same time, we acknowledge that having platforms that require command line create barriers for many researchers in other disciplines that don't traditionally use Linux. So having a design interface would really facilitate and increase access to this national DRI. So these are the points that we would like to discuss with you. And before we go into the breakout session, I would like to remind you that each of these breakouts will have a moderator and a note taker that will help you and guide you through the discussion. You will be able to participate directly in the chat or in the Google document like Nizar has said. But in the meantime, I really wish you an excellent conversation, and I will see you back in a few 30 minutes. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And I'm really sorry for the little technical hiccup that we had. We'll really improve this moving forward. In the meantime, we have 15 minutes to discuss some of the reports. So maybe I can call on some of the moderators to share some of the feedback that you've had. I don't know if maybe Jennifer Arbor or Shahira could start.
Sure.
You can go.
Great, thank you. Sure, I definitely, we had a great discussion, and apologies, we definitely ran to the end and we had one last comment just as we got brought back. So thank you. We got some really good kind of priority comments. One of them was awareness. How do we make sure everyone's aware of what resources and services that are available to them? And then along that is access. So where's the one-stop shop where you can go to find out all the different resources that you have access to? Being aware of your constituents, what their needs are, who they are, how to connect them together, and your partners that you can connect with. From the funding perspective, it was really around thinking about the operational requirements, the longer tail of funding. Once you have a piece set up, there's a lot as we move forward into software as a service and cloud services, there's always ongoing costs. And the current funding resources that are available are more focused on the one-time funding.
Perfect. Yeah, those are great points. Thank you, Jennifer. Shahira, since you're already here.
Sure. Yeah, we had a really great discussion as well. We focused a lot of our conversation on discussing bottlenecks for funding DRI. And so a lot of the comments focused around the need for funding for ongoing operations and end-of-life support for projects. There's a lot of confusion just around, what researchers are eligible for in terms of awards and different opportunities. And if they're not eligible, where else do they go to find funding for their work? And just becoming aware of different services and those sorts of opportunities takes a minimum level of support and skills in the DRI environment, and that varies across disciplines. We talked about the need to support research software development as an important thing that should be ongoing, and it's not always about the big infrastructure. And then to actually improve discovery and adoption, that takes a lot of one-on-one work. And so one of the terms that I liked from UBC was white glove onboarding for new users to really help them get up and running.
Yeah, that's really nice. I have a hand up, Seppo.
Yeah, thanks. So just as a moderator of one of those groups, one of the groups, I just wanted to touch because I already heard from Jennifer and Shahira something that was in our group. So I just wanted to connect to that. So regarding the funding, and there was a point that was made in our group that there is education needed and education done at the local level in the institution, in the research computing operations there, to educate new users, new faculty, that what is available within Canada and in the ecosystem already, so that perhaps funding is not even needed. That a specific DRI funding is not even needed because it already exists. So that goes to that sort of a lack of understanding of the whole service portfolio and need for that. And then regarding the sustainability of the funding, so there was also that the funding of research software, not only for development, but also for the long-term sustainability of that software. And then also that if could NRIO perhaps help with the funding of the software and the licensing of the commercial software, whereas also a point was made that with many of the commercial software options that are often quite expensive, there is nowadays an open source option, and how training can help people to learn about open source software and options that can be quite powerful tools. So those kind of thoughts. One last point that was emphasized by the group was our group was the platform, the how to go above the just pure infrastructure as a service, pure infrastructure, command line, whatever. Build a platform, perhaps discipline specific like Canva or something like that, but that will remove many of the obstacles and low-level stuff that is sort of perhaps unnecessarily complicated and unnecessary for the actual research exercise. So those kind of emphasis on platforms and how those are important going forward. Those kind of thoughts in our group.
Thank you, Seppo. So I just want to be mindful of the time. We have 6 minutes left, and I know that Lee had something that he wanted to share before we go into Nizar's final comments. And I really appreciate everybody who has their cameras on. It's always nice to see people's faces. Lee, do you have something to say?
Thanks, Felipe. I'll go quickly. So our group highlighted the importance of having a service catalog, or what we call a digital storefront, at the national level that clearly describes, the plurality of DRI services that are available to Canadian researchers, both locally and nationally. But it's important that the service catalog not just live centrally on a website somewhere, but it should be able to feed directly in local service catalogs as well. In terms of discovering opportunities about DRI funding, our group pointed out that it can be difficult to determine and justify whether these costs are direct versus indirect. And also our group highlighted difficulties in finding support for retaining HQP, as well as maintaining software and infrastructure ongoing beyond the initial development period.
Excellent, thank you, great points. So we have maybe time for one more point. Carrie, I know you want to say something.
Oh, sure. I'll be quick. We had a great conversation, but 3 main points. One was thinking about champions. So champions both at small institutions and large institutions. At small institutions could be the VP research who could help coordinate and facilitate discussion in this space. At a large institution, it might be a committee that's composed of IT, research, and admin, and they would kind of be the link to DRI. The second thing was around projects. So making sure or identifying the need for long-term projects and kind of decoupling that from PIs, and thinking about how researchers can talk to all funders sort of simultaneously and kind of aligning that conversation. And the third thing was really about good project management and instituting a project management process when thinking about how to provide these services amongst the space.
Perfect, thank you. It seems that there were very similar conversations across the different breakout sessions. So thank you, everybody. Just as a reminder, the Google documents that were shared with you in the breakouts are going to be open for you to just go in and contribute your own thoughts. So we invite you to do so. And in the meantime, I'm going to invite Nizar to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you, Felipe, and thank you, everyone. I'm not sure if I made it to every single group, but my job today was to have the privilege of being a bit of a butterfly and going room to room. So I made it to about 5 rooms. I'm not sure, Rob, how many we actually had in total, but it was terrific. It was great to be able to hear the variety of engaging discussion topics. You're right, Felipe, there was some common threads in at least the 5 rooms that I was able to participate in along the various questions that were raised. And I heard a number of really interesting things. One of the things that I think, well, I'm not supposed to attribute. But one of the things I heard in the groups was a comment about looking at bulk purchasing options around software, and recognizing we're all dealing with limited resources in a not-for-profit public sector. Are there ways that we could look at bulk purchasing or shared resources across institutions, across post-secondary institutions, colleges, and universities, and then even looking at collaborating around training and access to some of these things? And this particular comment was made in relation to research software, but I think the idea of collaboration as it relates to research data management and accessing advanced research computing holds. And so that's one particular comment that resonated for me. So in conclusion, folks, as we now complete the validation phase, we will be compiling all findings in our needs assessment report, which we will release for public review and comment. We continue to be committed to the opportunity for all of you to have input and guidance and shape the findings from your needs assessment. And all of this information will then inform our strategic plan and our national service delivery models. And so there are a number of different initiatives happening in parallel that will position us by the fall to be able to release our strategic plan, which all of you, again, will have the opportunity to participate in and help shape, because NDRIO, more than anything else, is your organization. It's the organization that's been established to serve researchers across Canada, and it's the organization that's been established to serve highly qualified personnel and leaders like many of you who've taken the time and energy to contribute to. So once again, recordings from today's portions of today's event and summary information will be available on our website in the spirit of transparency. We will also share a post-event survey with you later this week to collect any additional feedback. And as always, if you have further questions or comments, please let us know at any time by emailing our project team at research_recherche@engagedri.ca, and we would love to take your feedback from that as well, and it's listed on the screen. So thank you, everyone, and have an awesome afternoon.